kingdoms, kings, and an early republic. Ashwamedha Yajna. Around 3000 years ago, there were some new ways of choosing rajas. Some men became rajas by performing big sacrifices. One of such rituals was Ashwamedha, horse sacrifice, performed by specially trained priests. The Raja was an important figure, having special seat, a throne or a tiger skin. A horse was let loose to wander freely, and it was guarded by the Raja's men. If the horse wandered into the kingdoms of other Rajas and they stopped it, they had to fight. If they allowed the horse to pass, it meant that they accepted the hegemony of the king who wanted to perform the sacrifice and were then invited to the sacrifice on the behest of the king. His charioteer would chant tales of his glory. His wife's relatives had to perform minor rituals. The invited kings, Vaishya, except the Shudras, brought gifts to the king. Varna and types. The priests divided people into 4 groups called as Varnas. The Brahmins were expected to study and teach the Vedas, perform sacrifices, and receive gifts. Kshatriyas were rulers and were expected to fight battles and protect people. Vaishyas or Vish, who were farmers, herders, and traders. Shudras were slaves to above other 3 groups who were denied entry into the mainstream. Kshatriyas and Vaishyas could perform sacrifices. Reason for opposing Varna system. Feeling of superiority among Varnas, like some kings felt themselves superior to priests. Apprehending that birth could not decide Varnas or a person. Division of Varnas on the basis of occupation. The feeling that every person should have rights to perform rituals. The then prevalent practice of untouchability. There were areas where the social and economic differences were not sharp and the influence of priests was limited. Janapads. Janapada literally means the land where Jana or tribe set its foot and settled down. The Rajas who performed big sacrifices were then recognized as being Rajas of Janapadas rather than Janas. Archaeologists have excavated a number of settlements in these Janapadas, such as Purana Killa in Delhi, Hastinapur near Meerut, and Ataranjikhera near Itaha. Life in Janapadas. They found that people lived in huts and kept cattle as well as their animals. They also grew a variety of crops such as rice, wheat, barley, pulses, sugarcane, sesame, and mustard. They made earthen pots. One special type of pottery found at these sites is known as painted grey ware. Mahajanapadas. About 2500 years ago, some Janapadas became more important than others and were known as Mahajanapadas. Most Mahajanapadas had a capital city. Many of these were fortified, which means that huge walls of wood, brick, or stone were built around them. Forts were probably built because people were afraid of attacks from other kings and needed protection. Some rulers wanted to show how rich and powerful they were by building large, tall, and impressive walls around their cities. The land and the people living inside the fortified area could be controlled more easily by the king. Building such huge walls required a great deal of planning. The new Rajas began maintaining armies. Soldiers were paid regular salaries and maintained by the king throughout the year. Taxes. The rulers of the Mahajanapadas were building huge forts and maintaining big armies, so they needed more resources. To meet their requirement, they started collecting regular taxes. Taxes on crops were collected from peoples because most people were farmers. Usually, the tax was fixed at 1/6 of what was produced. This was known as bhag or a share. There were taxes on craftsperson as well. These could have been in the form of labor. Herders were also expected to pay taxes in the form of animals and animal produce. There were also taxes on goods that were brought and sold through the trade. Hunters and gatherers also had to provide forest produce to the Raja as tax. Changes in agriculture. There were two major changes in agriculture around Mahajanapada's time. Growing use of iron plowshares. This means heavy clay soil could be turned over better than with the wooden plowshares so that more grain could be produced. People began transplanting paddy. This meant that instead of scattering seed on the ground, saplings were grown and then planted in the fields. This work was done by slave men and women, dasas and dasis, and landless agriculture laborers, kamakaras. Magadha. Magadha became the most important Mahajanapadas in about 200 years. Many rivers such as the Ganga and Sun flowed through Magadha, which play an important role for transport, water supplies and making the land fertile. Parts of Magadha were forested, which was used for building houses, carts and chariots. There were iron and mines in the region that could be tapped to make strong tools and weapons. Magadha had two very powerful rulers, Bimbisara and Ajatasattu, who used all possible means to conquer other Janpadas. Rajagriha, present-day Rajgir in Bihar, was the capital of Magadha for several years. Later, the capital was shifted to Pataliputra, present-day Patna. Vaji. Vaji, with its capital at Vaishali, Bihar, was under a different form of government known as Gana or Sangha. Gana is used for a group that has many members. Sangha means organization or association. In a Gana, there were many rulers. Each one was known as a Raja. These Rajas performed rituals together. They also met in assemblies and decided what had to be done and how. Through discussion, and debate. Both Buddha and Mahavira belonged to Sangha, the last Sangha conquered by the Gupta rulers about 1500 years ago. Thank you. Hope you like this video.